Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Valerie Del Grosso, your friend who's a lawyer. It's day 4 of the never-ending workshop series leading into Little Black Legal Book Live. Thank you everybody for spending your time with me, for all the comments and feedback, for the YouTube views. All sorts of amazing things have been happening as a result of these videos going out in the world. So I'm hearing that a lot of you are having aha moments, and this information is really helpful to you as you think about launching your first or next coaching offer into the world. So I'm going to wait just a minute or two to let people join. I see some people joining now, and I'll give you a recap in the meantime for those of you who are here for what we've gone over and what we're going to cover today. So on day 1, if you haven't had a chance to watch this video, I really encourage you to go back and look for it in the group or check it out on YouTube. I did send the replay out by email because this is going to help you decide what sort of business traits you have now that lend themselves really nicely to a certain, hi Sharon, a certain coaching offer, whether it's a one-on-one style offer, group offer, or otherwise. That's what we did on Monday. We also looked at the difference between coaching offers versus the strategies that we use to market them. So hopefully that was able to you were able to use that information to determine exactly what sort of resources you might already have at hand, in other words, courses and programs you've paid for, versus what you might need to cover, where you might have a hole in your strategy. So the next 2 days, we looked at the forgotten aspects of selling legally. So just checking that your program names and your images are available. Hi Shar, hi guys, I see you logging on. And then yesterday we got really specific about what exact legal documents you need to have in place if you want to launch an offer like today. And so that covered website policies like privacy policy, terms and conditions, and disclaimer. We talked about client agreements and refund policies, and we went through a privacy policy template. So those resources are still available in the group. And this is just a final reminder that these videos will all be coming down on Tuesday night. So if you need something to binge watch this weekend, you could definitely catch up on these videos. If you have questions, just tag me. I will be available and have my notifications on as we're in launch week. Today, though, we're going to get really into the nitty-gritty, and I would love for you to be able to take some notes as we're going, or come back to this video with a notepad in hand. I mentioned earlier in the week, as a little bit of a pat on the back to myself, that the way that I have gone about creating templates for the coaching industry is that I have made certain legal decisions in advance so that you don't have to know the whole universe of potential legal options you have. Decide among them, and then also try to create and fill in templates for yourself. What I've done instead in the last 6 or 7 years of working with coaches is take a look at how these disputes that occasionally do arise play out, think through the best scenario and best way and strategy to handle those potential disputes, and I've just gone ahead and made those legal decisions for you so that you don't have to become your own legal expert or anything. All you need to know is, what is my offer? Who is it for, and what do I want to include? And then you simply drop that information into these templates that are already beautifully customized for the coaching industry. That makes it really easy for you. That helps us kind of establish a standard for doing business in the coaching industry that I think can benefit all of us and have great client results. And it's just this beautiful marriage of what you do and what I do in a legal document that's really accessible and inexpensive for you. So that's what we're going to work on together today, is the magic of selecting the business terms for your coaching client agreement. And then at the end, I'll show you how you can get in on my templates programs, how you can work with me this summer in 4 live group calls, all kinds of fun bonuses, and just all of that kind of thing. Just for those of you who know that you need to do this and get it done, my amazing assistant Sharon is going to drop the link later in the comments for you so you can see that. A post will be going up in the group at 12:30 that has the link, and we'll have some expiring bonuses today to help some of you off the fence, but you will have until the 24th actually to sign up. There'll be fewer bonuses, a little higher price, you know how launches work, but that will be happening. So let's dive right in, get your notepad ready. As always, Sharon will mark the questions for me and I'll come back to them. But right now, I'll have you go to delgrossolaw.com/checklist in another tab. you'll find a checklist there, and if you don't have it in front of you, that's okay. I'll walk you through it. But this is my 2-page ultimate guide to a great client agreement, so that no matter what type of offer you're making, whether it's a VIP day, whether it's a group program, some type of high-end mastermind, these are still just the business terms that you need to think about. Once you know the offer and the business terms, you would just go out to Little Black Legal Book, grab your client agreement template, and everything will be highlighted right there for you, so you can just plug in these terms. Now, I really try to avoid any kind of legal technical discussion because it's boring, and that is not what you need to be expending your mental energy on as a coach. But I do want to make one simple point. When it comes to a client agreement, the thing that makes it valid, enforceable, the thing that makes it a contract is the exchange of value. So simply by putting in there the price in exchange for what the program is, you've got a valid contract. I promise to pay you $1,500 if you promise to deliver access to a client portal and 9 weekly calls over the course of 12 weeks. That's a contract. That's an oral contract, but if you put it on paper, it would be a written contract, totally valid and enforceable. You may think though, gosh, that sounds just a lot like a receipt, name of product and price paid. And that's true. So we want our contracts to be more than just a receipt. First of all, our systems already provide receipts most of the time if you're using Stripe or some kind of program like Entreport or whatever the case may be. So we want to take this exchange of promises and use it for the opportunity it is, where we're also promising in advance how we're going to handle things if they don't go wrong. If everything goes right, the receipt is just fine. The program got delivered and the money got exchanged. But the contract can be used to explain what happens if somebody gets in the program and doesn't like it. What happens if somebody gets in the program and decides to stop paying or just stops paying because the card is declined? The contract can also explain what happens if somebody is abusing the program, like not showing up for calls repeatedly, trying to get stuff that isn't specifically included in the program. What happens if somebody comes into the program, they've paid, in other words, they've done their share of the work, but it turns out that they're a really bad fit for the community and they're kind of toxic in the audience. You want to make sure that you've taken this opportunity, this exchange of promises, to include and address all of those situations that can sometime arise. The other ones also pertain to how the people can use your materials. So this checklist, I'm going to run through it just pretty quickly. And once you have that in place, you'll be ready to just go out and grab the right client agreement template for you. All right. So the first thing we go through is, who is this agreement between? That's going to be your company, which if you've got an LLC or corporation set up, use that name. We want to make sure that that business entity is also the one that's actually collecting the money and that you're not using a personal Stripe account or personal PayPal account. But equally importantly is, who is the client? Is it an individual? Is it a business? Is it an individual who owns a business? You want to be really clear about that. And I'll just say, whenever possible, if you can characterize your client as a business, this is really helpful for you, because typically businesses are entitled to fewer gotcha legal protections than individuals. So if you're doing any kind of business coaching or mindset coaching around helping business owners, there you'll see some language in my templates that refer to them as a business owner. All right. I also encourage you to get a physical address. So whether that's on your credit card form or in your sales process over the phone, this just makes it easier if, God forbid, you do ever have to go out and try to collect money from them. Having as many personal details like that as possible is really key. And then you'll see in this checklist, I ask you, when does the agreement start and end? Sometimes this is a no-brainer. It's just right when the group coaching program starts, and it's a fixed 8-week or 12-week or 6-month container or whatever the case may be. If you're running cohorts like that, I really encourage you to have the end date of the program in there. If it's a more open-ended item like a membership, you'll see in my templates there is no end date. But when possible, we like to create an end date so that if somebody doesn't use their calls, for example, the container has ended, and your business policies will address that those calls are forfeited if they're not used. But this is a way to make sure that your client agreement, your sales page, your sales conversation, and your business policies are all congruent about the fact that the program does have an end date. Now, I also like to cover the purpose of the agreement, and that may be as simple as to deliver coaching services that this person is requesting. But for more complex relationships, it's important, especially for business coaches, I would say, that the agreement is very specific, that this person is not becoming a practitioner of your method. They're not getting permission to reteach if that's the case. They're not getting an endorsement from you. It really is just for the delivery of some teaching principles for them to use personally in their own business. So understanding the purpose of the agreement and communicating that is a really great way to set some context, both for your clients so you can avoid some issues, but as well for payment processors or a court if it ever got in front of a court. You may also want to specify what the program excludes. So we talked about some things like the right to reteach you're going to exclude, but you can also just be very clear. In a group program, you can let them know one-on-one coaching is not included here. There's not a one-on-one support option. Or for one-on-one programs, you may want to exclude explicitly done-for-you services. If you're a copy coach, people may send you work that's 20% done and expect you to actually do the heavy lifting and write the copy. And that's not really coaching. That's more of a done-for-you service. And by putting into your agreement right off the bat that this type of done-for-you service is excluded, you can really avoid scope creep and inaccurate expectations that can sour client relationships. So I like to also include what your client's responsibilities are. We do this in two places. One is the disclaimer to say, hey, you've got to come to the table with X, Y, Z. And if you need more, like especially professional advice like mental health services, medical services, financial advice, you need to go out and procure that on your own because that's not the purpose of this program. I like to repeat similar principles in the client agreement as well to let people know that if they want to get the most out of the program, they should be prepared for the calls. They should be prepared to make additional complementary investments in software or other services, for example. This just really makes it clear that you are not the one-stop shop. Being a one-stop shop is a really difficult marketing message to fulfill because people are coming at you from so many different stages of life, stages of business, experience, and financial situations. So I discourage you from using that one-stop shop or business in a box or the last program you'll ever need type marketing messaging. And also to clarify again that the client will probably need other things to bring to the table inside of your client agreement. Now, I like to then go into what happens if your client doesn't hold up their end of the bargain. This is things like failing to pay, failing to finish the payment plan. And one very explicit way you can address this is by letting people know that there is a pay in full price for the program. Let's say it's $10,000 for a year-long program, but you do offer a courtesy installment plan. It's not a membership. It's $1,000 a month, or they can pay in full and get a pay in full discount. There's some language that I don't love that I see around people saying that there's a finance fee. Really want to discourage you from using any kind of interest-related terms or finance-related terms. Instead, focus on a pay in full discount with a courtesy payment plan, not being a membership. Seeing lots of clients lately wiggle out saying, oh, I just want to cancel the membership. And it's like, you know better that this was not a membership. Then you'll also want to specify that if they don't use the calls within a certain period of time, namely the end date on the contract, they're forfeited without a refund. Those are big ones. Once you have that in place, you'll also want to make sure you've got a plan in place for what you'll do if a person is not a fit for the program and or does want to terminate. So this can get complicated because it can depend on the law of the state where your client lives. But a very baseline position you can take on this is that you've got a no refunds policy And if you're in a situation where a client turns out to not be a great fit for the program, you retain the right, without explaining the reason why, that you can terminate the contract and remove them from the program. I'll tell you a quick story about this. But when you do that, you don't want someone feeling like, wait a second, I'm going to pay this money and they could just terminate me for no reason and no explanation. What's going to happen with the money I've already paid? So if you retain that right, and I encourage you to do it, you will need to give at least a prorated refund, if not a refund for the whole entire program. I have a client who put this in her documents, and she had someone who wanted to wire a 6-figure sum to get started in an annual program. And the lady saw the contract and she's like, I don't want this program. I don't want you to be able to kick me out of the program. So my client came to me, we talked about it, and we thought, okay, she's going to wire the money, which means there's no, refund button you can just go inside of Stripe and hit. So you can't get her money back to her. You have no way to get the money back to her if you kick her out. And she's raising this red flag that she doesn't want to be kicked out. It sounds like she might potentially be a problem child, and she knows that she can use the power of this large sum of money with no way for you to return it to just be a time suck and like a soul sucking client. And so my client ended up kind of abiding by that red flag and not letting the lady into the program. And when she refused to back down on negotiating that piece, the lady showed her true colors. And it turned out she is a problem child, very aggressive, not super coachable, which meant this was a great way that, even though normally we don't want our contract to kill our conversions, this is definitely a sale that my client was better off not making. So just FYI, that's how that can fit in, especially when you're selling much more expensive and lengthier term coaching packages where someone can turn into this nightmare in your life, okay? So finally, you have some of the more legal boilerplate things that we would talk about. We want to make sure that the law that would apply to any kind of dispute under the contract is where you live. Any kind of dispute has to be handled where you live. A lot of times I'll see the law of the state of Michigan applies, but nobody mentions that the court case also has to happen in Michigan. You don't want to be getting sued around the country or around the world. And we don't want you to be getting sued at all, but that having it take place at least where you live gives you some home turf advantage, makes it difficult, an additional hurdle for a client to sue you if they have to come to where you are. And then, of course, you'll want to include your refunds policy. We talked about that yesterday, about the importance of having a really black and white refund policy, even if behind the scenes you will offer some wiggle room if the circumstances call for it. But we want to make sure that the refund policy is crystal clear so that you don't have a payment processor looking at coaching homework to determine if it was satisfactorily done or not. Let's see, for those of you who are having an in-person component to your programs, you will want to make sure that you address who is responsible for the cost of things like transportation and lodging, the risk of interruptions in your ability to deliver the program, injuries, what happens if there's damaged or missing property, changes in the speaker lineup. These are all things that we want to make sure are addressed in advance in the contract. And then finally, if you are recording any kind of calls and plan to include them in the program, just like with guest experts, we also want to get your client's permission to have those recordings up, and doing that in the client agreement is a great place for it to go. Now, if for those of you using Zoom lately, you know that if you're recording, Zoom is kind of sending out these warnings, and you can set up the settings for that in your Zoom account. So that's one more line of defense if you are not currently having that in your agreement, but you are recording calls. So these items, there's about 15 of them. I just kind of went through them quickly, but at the site delgrossolaw.com/checklist, you can actually get this checklist, and it will kind of walk you through and give you some ideas for how you may want to handle these situations in your own program. I did touch on this a little bit yesterday, but it bears repeating. You don't want to collect money from someone who has not been able to at least review these terms, even if they haven't signed this contract, before they pay. You never want to exchange value without having all of the promises that they're making in front of the client. And it's not as important with a payment processor, but if you caught the chargebacks video, you know that the payment processor is just kind of an informal resolution. Whether someone wins or loses, they can still go to court. the court will be much more interested in whether this person paid the money without getting to first see what they were agreeing to, with the law squarely being on the side of you don't have to agree to something that you haven't seen in advance. So as you're setting this up in your own system, you'll want to have linked terms and conditions on the order form where they're going to make payment, so that they can at least have access to seeing what the contract looks like. They can pay, and then you can send them out a contract for signature. In the most ideal world, I would love for you to send the contract first and then collect payment. If that turns out to be a conversion issue, you can do it the other way, just knowing there's a slight risk associated. One software service that does this very well is Dubsado. It is really more geared towards creatives, but I do see some coaches using it. And what it does is it sends an email that has the link to the contract where they can click to agree or e-sign even. And then it also has the link to click through to the actual invoice, and it displays the remaining number of payments very cleanly. So Dubsado does a whole lot of things, but from the standpoint of user friendliness and addressing this payment and contract timing issue, it's one of the best that's out there. So this, you don't have to overthink that. The most important thing is to make sure that you've got the proof that the person either clicked to agree to the contract and or actually e-signed the contract, and it's easily accessible in case you're ever in a situation with a chargeback. All right, I am going to stop there and answer some questions, and then I will tell you all about where you can get these client agreement templates and how to use them and the time involved and all of that. So someone said, if you're doing coaching online at home, what physical address can we use, P.O. Box or suite? So this is really kind of two questions. Oh, hi, Sharon. I think it was you who asked this. So this actually incorporates two questions. From the standpoint of privacy, having a privacy policy like we talked about yesterday, your email software provider, CRM service like MailChimp or Entreport or whatever, will have you put an email address in the footer of every email that goes out. For that, you do need a physical address, and that rule comes from the Federal Trade Commission in the US. It needs to be a physical business address, not a P.O. box. So a lot of people are like, I don't want to use my home address on that, and it's understandable why. So what you can do is go out and get a mailbox service. There's one, up the street from my house. It's a place called Postal Pros. Technically, it's a P.O. box, but they are allowed to use their physical street address. So it might be, 10,000 West Charleston, Suite 301, but the suite is really just the box number. That will suffice. So for any kind of business purposes, it's worth paying the $8 or $10 or $20 a month if you don't want to have your personal home address out there in the world. But the second question, kind of going back to the checklist we just went through, I'm actually talking about collecting mailing information for your client. So a lot of times doing business online, people will just put in the credit card number. They don't have to put in the full billing address. They can just put in a zip code. But I encourage you to try to collect a phone number, a good email address, a good home address, because God forbid, if you end up having to go out and sue somebody, you need to know where they're physically located. You need to show that the address that you're serving them with notice of the suit is not just something you grabbed online. You have reason to believe that they live there, namely because that's the address that they gave you. So that's one way where, even though it's amazing to do business online and it can be very streamlined, that's a little bit of an old-fashioned element that I encourage you to have in your business. And all the CRMs will let you create fields for that to collect. So depending on your payment processor, it may require selecting a billing address, but you may have to opt into including a separate mailing address. That does bring me to one other point. All of the things I'm talking to you about are best business practices. Except for the privacy policy, none of them are actually legal requirements. They're just best legal practices to employ to make it easy for everybody to understand what they're getting into, as well as for you to be able to enforce the promises people have made to you. But technically, having that mailing address is not a requirement. Having a contract is not even a requirement. But for most coaches who feel like a little powerless about what would happen in case of payment drama or content thieves and all of these issues that we've touched on, These are all safeguards and preventative measures that we build in so that if you're ever in these situations, you have all of the recourse available to you. It pains me the most, a lot of coaches reach out who really didn't have a comprehensive set of legal protections in place, or they piecemealed it from different places, and then in the case of a dispute, it turns out it's very inconsistent. I'll give you an example of that in a second. It kind of breaks my heart. It does break my heart to say to them, like, you may be right, but you've really tied my hands as the lawyer in writing a cease and desist letter or responding to a chargeback because I don't have all of these touch points to pull from. Sometimes I don't have any touch points to pull from. And that makes it very difficult. And so now the coach is in a situation where not only is the dispute very disruptive, but the fact that they have no clue how it can turn out. In other words, the outcome is going to be totally left to chance. It screws with your mind. So having all of these things in place that we talked about, having them all be internally consistent, yes, cover your biscuits, that's right, puts me in a good position to go to bat for you. It puts me in a good position to give you cease and desist letter templates and chargeback response templates that are going to be a breeze even for a team member of yours to fill out, because you've got all the little breadcrumbs in place that they can just go and draw from. And the nice thing about having a great client agreement in place is you know exactly how the dispute will go. You know exactly what to say if someone reaches out for a refund. You know exactly what your rights are if they go to the bank and ask for their money back. And having that certainty really minimizes the disruption and the morale killing feeling of having these chargebacks or refund requests come in, because at least you have a sense of how it's going to turn out. So I tell people all the time, because I get the question, well, you're a lawyer, why are you selling templates? Are templates good? Are templates bad? Why should I pay for your templates instead of something random I can go and Google? And although there are many answers to that, I am squarely in favor of templates, because the right template, I know you've got a great template when you can tell me in your own words, like, this is what's going to happen if somebody requests a chargeback. This is what's going to happen if somebody goes out and tries to reteach my material, because the client agreement, the template, first of all, addresses it. And then second of all, is super clear such that you and your client understand exactly what it means. And contracts that are not written for the industry definitely won't even speak to it. And that's a huge problem. But client agreements that, templates that are drafted by people who aren't super familiar with the industry, even if they do kind of address it, most of the time the client is coming to me going, what rights do I have under my own contract? And I'm thinking, this is not a good template. It was probably sold on its own without any kind of context or explanation. So I really get on my high horse about that, because I am in this business as a real lawyer. I go to court, I get yelled at by judges, I am in there going to bat for people. And that means I have a good sense of how these things play out in the real world. It's not theoretical. It's not, I'm just sitting here drafting contracts and hoping for the best. It's been a decade plus that I've been doing this. And so I take it really to heart to make sure that I'm giving you something that will work when the chips are down. So with that in mind, let me tell you